Hey everybody, have you considered starting a podcast? We here at Screwball highly recommend Podbean for getting your podcast out to a larger audience. Podbean has given us the ability to easily bring you Screwball each and every week on all of your favorite podcast services. Use the link podbean.com/screwball to sign up and save up to 35% annually. You can also use the link podbean.com/pro/screwball to sign up for a business subscription. Happy podcasting. Hey everybody, welcome back to Screwball, a baseball podcast, your home for everything baseball. I'm your host, Mike Lepre, here with my co-host, Frank White.
Hey, how's it going?
And this is episode 71 of Screwball, following the All-Star break, the All-Star week that we had, coming off of a weekend series. Not a lot of baseball going on other than the All-Star game and the return weekends. So we got a lot to talk about regarding the upcoming trade deadline, the results of the All-Star break, some COVID issues going on with a particular team and other teams. Injury concerns and all the like. So instead of going right into the news, because like I said, there is a bit to talk about, let's start with our topic of conversation this week, which is in regard to the current state of 2021 baseball, of the parity in the league. Particularly, is there maybe, is this the most even year that we've seen in a while? Some years we see teams that are far and away the best, they're the best. And then there's teams that, are the worst and they're not even close. Now, this isn't untrue for this year, but it seems to be a pretty big trend going on that there doesn't seem to be that one dominant team. Everyone kind of seems to be kind of packed in. Like I usually, say here, Frank brings our topic up every week, so I'll let him, as usual, kind of lead off the conversation with where he was kind of had his mind at when doing the topic. So yeah, what are you kind of thinking with this one?
Just wanted to bring it up because we're halfway, a little over halfway through the season with the All-Star break, trade deadline coming, and you see that a lot of these teams are not running away with the division, especially teams that were expected to be really good, like the Braves are around 500. The Yankees only a few over. You get Twins who have just been really bad this year. The Indians have been faltering lately. The Cubs were hot and then ice cold. Even the Dodgers and Padres have been through their hot and cold streaks. Then you get teams like the Giants better than they're supposed to be, and the Brewers even possibly better than they're supposed to be. So you just look over at the standings and you go, well, this is got to be one of the closest years we've seen in a while, because these really good teams that we expected aren't as good as we kind of thought they were going to be, at least as of now, and some of these other bad teams are kind of playing better. So no one's really out of it. Yes, you got a couple teams that are really kind of down and out. But a lot of teams, even the Mariners, I think the Mariners are even higher in the wild card than the Yankees. I mean, these are teams that aren't really supposed to be that good.
Mm-hmm.
Detroit doesn't have much talent. I think they're like 9 games under, which really isn't that bad. The Angels around 500 with all the injuries they've dealt with. I mean, it's just a lot of teams just there. And the divisions are relatively close. Even, you look at the Yankees division, that's relatively close. The Yankees, I think, themselves are only 7 games out. You say that's 7 games, but they also play a lot. It's the second half of the season, trade deadline, and division games. That's not that bad when you're supposed to be a good team.
Mm-hmm.
The Braves a couple of games out. The Cardinals. Look at the Cardinals. They're tied for 3rd place.
I think so.
They're
yeah,
7 games out.
Something like that. Yeah,
they were a team. They had the best record in baseball for a little while. So it's just very, very hot or cold this year. You haven't had those teams that are real hot and kind of stay hot all year and cold, and the teams that you can't really. Before the year, you couldn't put you had these teams that you could place here and here and here, and you kind of expected them to be there, but you're not getting that throughout the year.
Yeah.
Now you're not getting, this team's going to kind of be here, maybe second, or this team's going to be here, maybe second, or this team's going to be a wild card team, maybe fight for the division. This team's going to be last. This team's going to be last. You don't really have that. You got this team's last. This team's last. This team's in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
This team's in first, but not far. It's very close. Where one bad week, and you're selling the team.
Yeah.
One bad week and you're buying everybody else's players, or you're just staying there, or anything. So I think it's really, you get that every year. It's understandable, but I think there's more teams in that boat this year. Agreed. It's not like, oh, well, this team has a hot week this week, they're buying. It's like, well, if these 4 teams have a hot week this week, they're buying. But if these 4 teams are a cold week, they're selling. That's the difference. You get teams like the Braves who could sell.
Yeah.
The Yankees who could kind of, or I should say the Braves could do both. They could sell a little and buy a little. The Yankees could sell a little and buy a little. You got a lot of teams who could do that. You got the Mariners who technically could buy, but are probably going to sell. It seems like the Orioles are going to sell, but also probably maybe buy a little for the future.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a weird area, spot where you're just not really.
It's strange.
You don't have that just like, oh, we're gonna, this team's going nuts, and that's just how it is. Everyone's chasing them.
Yeah, yeah. There really isn't. I'd say the few teams that came as advertised this year, for me personally, are the White Sox. Kind of came as advertised. Dodgers came as advertised. Padres came as advertised. Giants were nowhere on my radar. Like you said, Mariners kind of nowhere on my radar. Red Sox weren't even really on my radar. They're one of the few teams that I could kind of see it. But, it is strange that there's just a lot of middle-of-the-pack stuff. I've called it, and I've said this to my dad often. Me and my dad talk baseball a lot. He says it's one of the strangest years in baseball for me, just wrapping my head around which teams are good and bad. For a while, you had the Mariners were in first place. The Royals were in first place. Granted, it was early in the year, but teams like that typically, come out, they don't come out that hot. So it was strange to me right off the bat. Then you have the Yankees and the Braves, like you mentioned, are the biggest cases for me. I had them as my predictions for the World Series, and they're both honestly like mediocre at best this year. Granted, the Braves have had a lot of problems. Yankees have had their share of problems, but there's really not big enough excuses, especially for the Yankees, to be where they are. Cardinals, case in point, too, where I kind of thought that they'd run away with things, and you said it. They were first in the MLB at some point, and a team like the Brewers, we criticized their pitching up and down, that didn't really have much talent there, and look at where they are, and they have some of the best pitchers in the league. I mean, there's a lot of just stuff to me that just don't make any sense. Now, obviously, some teams do come as advertised. The Orioles we knew were going to be bad. The Pirates we knew were going to be bad. There's no big, not everything's a surprise. But I'd say overall, yeah, absolutely. This is the strangest, closest year that I can remember. There's no, like, last year the Dodgers, if you remember all of our episodes, the Dodgers had the best record in the league almost all year. There's no team like that this year. It's just, it seems like an ever-changing, rotation of best teams and best players. And I don't know, it's hard to kind of hard to just, point your finger at the team and be like, well, that team's going to win the World Series. I kind of look at all the teams and go, well, maybe. I don't know. Anyone. I feel like this is truly a year where anyone can win it.
Yeah. I mean, even the storylines and headlines have been crazy. Ohtani and his thing, and Vlad going nuts, and some other younger players going nuts. The Diamondbacks, really a team that you expect to be kind of around 500. Winning like 4 games in like a 60-game span.
Terrible. Yeah.
The Rockies have the most walk-off wins this year with 10, and they only have 9 road wins. They have 9 wins on the road this year, but they have 10 walk-off wins.
Yeah.
I mean, the stat lines and the stats and the storylines and the standings, everything's just off the charts, weird. And the fans are loving it. The viewership's way up.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most viewed All-Star weekends or weeks. And viewership's just been going way up. 20%, 15%, 18% here, 24% here. It's just everything's been going up, which is great. It's just we knew it was going to be a weird year for the most part, and it was going to be an anticipated year, but I don't think we quite expected all that. So, which is good. It's definitely good. You want to see that, but I just wanted to bring that up just because we were at that point where it's time to buy and sell, and you are who your record is, and it's like, well. This is one of the craziest years I remember. Usually you got 4 or 5 teams, and there's like, they run off, and then you got 4 or 5 teams fighting for a wild card spot or 2, and then you got 4 or 5 teams fighting for, I'm going to get the first pick next year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's just kind of it.
Yeah.
Really, you can get there's 20 teams that and there's 20 teams that could sell.
Yeah. Yep.
And it all makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah. There's a lot of teams sitting right now like, well, let's see what happens with this series or 2. Let's see if we can win this series. Maybe we win 3 or 4. All of a sudden, we're right in the wild card hunt. Maybe we could buy. Or all of a sudden, we got swept a 4-game series, and all of a sudden now we're sellers. It's really like there's a lot of teeter-tottering teams, Yeah,
or you kind of do both. I sell off the guy who's a free agent after this year, but I buy a guy who's I got 2 years eligibility.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like I still gonna try competing this year, but I'm also gonna be smart for next year. That's where you got some teams too. So it's very, weird. And then you got all these players that could be on the deadline, on the block, who could just throw a big wrench into things.
Yeah.
I mean, superstars who can get traded, and you're like, oh, that'd do it.
Yeah, there was
let's say the Giants come out and go get, I'm not saying they're going to go get them, but let's say they come out crazy, and they're like, oh, we're just going to get Trevor Story.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Or Joey Gallo, or, they're going to get Max Scherzer, and you're like, oh, all right.
Yeah. So you're all in now.
Yeah, now you're all in. And then all of a sudden they get them and they lose like 15 straight. You're like, well, that didn't work.
Yeah.
That could easily happen with a
Mhm.
team like the Giants.
Yeah.
Because you're like, well, this team wasn't really supposed to be all that. It's you just don't know.
Yeah.
Or a team like the Reds started the year hitting 900. I felt like
Mhm.
they can go on a run here and win 20 out of the next 25 and then be in first place.
Yeah. Yep.
Or they could easily win tomorrow and sell.
And the one of the most interesting divisions all year even is the NL East. A lot of those teams do. The
You're in
Mets.
last place and you're in the hunt.
Yeah, I mean, like I told you this before we started recording, the Marlins had the best run differential in that division for a stretch. And they're in last. And the Braves what do they do? Because they're supposed to be good, but they're not. And then you have contracts them coming up. The Mets have had nothing but injuries as usual. The Phillies are kind of right there. The Nationals are kind of right there. That's such a division that could just really just flip flop. Have a real change of heart with the trade deadline. So it's nice, like you said, that we have such, like, even us as like seasoned baseball fans, I'd say, we don't even know how to make heads or tails of some of this. So in a way it's nice, but in a way it's kind of like, well, some of your favorite teams out there are like, you're watching them and going, well, what is going on? Why are we this bad? Or hell, why are we this good? I'll take it. So it's definitely a weird year. I wouldn't be surprised if the playoffs were weird. I wouldn't be surprised if the final World Series winner was weird. And overall, I kind of like it, but I kind of don't. It really sums it up well that I'm kind of 50-50 with it, because the season seems to be very 50-50.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking on it. It's just it's interesting, and it keeps you watching. If you're just a fan of baseball and you kind of watch all the teams and watch the stats, it's definitely interesting. It'll keep you entertained. So let's move on to our news segment of the show. And the number one piece of news, obviously, the results of the All-Star break. Because when we posted our episode last week, although it posted after the All-Star game, we didn't know the results of the Home Run Derby or All-Star break, or the All-Star game, excuse me. So the All-Star week brought the Home Run Derby and All-Star game, as we previously said. In case you missed it, Pete Alonso defeated Trey Mancini in the finals of the Home Run Derby, which won him the back-to-back Home Run Derby titles, as, obviously there was no Home Run Derby last year in 2020. The next day, the AL defeated the NL in the All-Star game by a score of 5-2, with Shohei Ohtani getting the win, Max Scherzer getting the loss, and Vlad Jr. bringing home the MVP. I believe, obviously Pete Alonso now winning back-to-back. I think he's one off of the most all-time. I think the most all-time is 3. I think Griffey's got that. So, so there's that. The All-Star game, the American League just seems to trounce the NL anymore. I forget the exact stats. But I know the AL in the early 2000s went on an absolute tear, winning every year, and now it seems they're back on that. I'm not, the NL has so much talent, it kind of surprises you every year that it happens. Another All-Star week completed. Thankfully, we had it this year. We missed it last year, and hopefully we have just as much excitement next year and even more. Number 2, the Blue Jays are finally coming home. On July 30th, the Toronto Blue Jays are finally returning to the Rogers Center for home games after a long stint in Buffalo due to COVID restrictions, restricting travel between the U.S. and Canada. The Blue Jays will return for a homestand in which they play the Royals, Red Sox, and Indians. I believe it's a total of 10 games they're going to be on the homestand. So Blue Jay fans, you can finally go see your team if you live in Canada, or I guess if you live in northern United States, it'd be impressive if you just cross the line all the time to see them. But yeah, so good for them. I know that the players are probably going to finally be familiar in their clubhouse, maybe bring a different vibe. I know the fans are going to be cooking because their Blue Jays are actually pretty good. So good for them, and good for sports and baseball overall that all the teams are finally back in their home ballpark.
Yeah. I mean, Toronto, we mentioned a couple weeks ago that they were putting a petition or feeler up to get back to Toronto. I think they're going to go back with about 5,000 fans or 15,000 fans or something. It wasn't supposed to be a bunch, but that's good for them and good for their area and team and franchise and players and everything.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
There's players in that team who've never played in Toronto as a Blue Jay, but been on the team for 2 years.
Which is amazing.
So, some news I got here, we have seen COVID tick up here recently. Not much of a, guys actually getting sick and spreading out. More of a, I think, maybe with the All-Star break and people being in different spots and maybe not being as careful or harder to track, kind of. Maybe I think it's been a little bit more careful with guys. And, with the vaccines up for most teams, like I said, the guys really aren't sick. They're just, they're testing positive, maybe false positive. We've seen with the Yankees, the Rockies, the Braves had a test here. So everyone's kind of dealing with it again, which we haven't dealt with in, since April?
Yeah, it feels
May.
like, yeah.
We haven't really dealt with it, as much.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, I think with the All-Star break and people going and being hard to, like, hey, who were you around? You're like, oh, well, I was around a lot more family members and stuff like that. Well, it's easier to just be like, hey, let's just put you here for now, just to be safe. So I think that's kind of what's going on. Once we get another week or two in and the teams are kind of back together consistently, I think it'll kind of wash itself away once more. But something to keep note of, especially if you're for your favorite team or for fantasy wise.
Yeah, definitely.
And my other piece of news here goes kind of with the topic. We have Twins, Cubs, Indians, Marlins, and Rockies are teams expected to be sellers at the deadline. We've seen the Cubs with their cold streak and the Indians with their cold streak kind of push their hand there.
Yeah.
But we also have teams like the Marlins who I think are going to be more of a both approach. Like, we'll sell a little, we'll buy a little, and kind of try winning. And Twins could possibly... Twins, I know they're said, anyone who's not on a contract next year is fair game. Anyone after that, we're hard-pressed to get rid of them. But then you also have teams like the Phillies, Reds, Cardinals, and Angels, who teams are expected to buy. Phillies been hot here recently when the NL East not been great. They can definitely make a move. Reds have been offensively hot and cold big time all year if they can get some more consistent pitching. Cardinals have one of the best rosters when healthy, but they've dealt with some of the most injuries all year to crucial players, including their entire rotation, except Adam Wainwright. They've really dealt with a lot of injuries. And then you have the Angels, who I've seen people talk about, which is, it makes the most sense. They have the best, they already had the best trade deadline, which you might sound crazy because we're not even there yet. But on the horizon is Mike Trout. That's almost like trading for Mike Trout. I know it sounds weird, but that's like the feeling. It's like when you get a guy back from injury, it's like, almost like we traded for that guy. That's almost what the Angels are going to get.
Yeah, it's
and they're
big.
playing relatively good baseball, so they can kind of keep it around. Otani's doing his thing. Jared Walsh is going nuts. David Fletcher's actually going nuts. And then you get Mike Trout back, and you're like, all right, here we go. We go get a pitcher. Maybe they go, get some of the prospects. They built the system up a little bit. They go get Scherzer. They had that rotation for a year or two. You're talking something, maybe they make a run at least a wild card spot, which is wide open.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those are my little bits of notes here going into our first full week back after the All-Star break.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that with my third piece of news here, kind of the final piece of news. With the trade deadline, there has been some smaller trades. One, I guess, a little bit bigger than the other, but Jock Peterson was traded to the Braves in the past week. That kind of officially kicks off, the trade deadline season. The Cubs are, kind of starting their supposed fire sale by trading Jock Peterson to the Braves, a guy that was pretty expendable for them. Stephen Vogt was also traded to the Braves by the Diamondbacks last week. And as he talked about, their buyers and sellers already being established. There's a whole slew of players that could go. Trevor Story. I heard Starling Marte said no to an extension, so he's being traded almost shortly. Adam Frazier, Eduardo Escobar, guys like that are pretty much on the block. Some of those guys are almost guarantees to go. So there's a lot to look forward to, especially if you're a team that's in a good spot to buy. And you're just maying a second baseman, or maybe you're missing that shortstop, or you're missing that outfielder, or you're missing that one big arm. You could really turn your season up to 11. So that'd be it's going to be good for a lot of teams. It could be good for teams even if you're a seller, and all of a sudden you start rebuilding and you really start getting big prospects. So in a way, even if you're a seller, it's always good to look forward.
Especially if you're a team like the Marlins, who I don't think are far off as it is, or maybe even a team like Detroit, who's got a bunch of pitching coming up. And not a bunch of not real far off. Maybe the Orioles not too far off. Those teams where it's like, okay, we got some prospects coming and we add more to it, or maybe add younger, almost MLB ready players or younger MLB ready players. You could turn push the rebuild up 1 year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of be here, ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a bunch going on. We're gonna be going on here real soon. Well, it's going on, but we won't see it in the news yet.
Yeah, next week I'm sure we'll have trades to talk about, and we'll have more rumors. And then the week after that we record, we'll have the results of it. Really, I believe we'll be pretty close. So that's where we're at with the trade deadline. The number 4 piece of news here is the wrap up. Who's doing the best right now? So with only a few games, obviously, since last episode, there wasn't much changing, really, with the divisions. The Giants still own the best record in the league at 58-34. The Dodgers are right behind them at 58-36. The White Sox own the best record in the AL with 56-36, and the Red Sox and the Astros are tied behind them at 56-38. Dodgers own the best run differential in the league at plus 154, and the Diamondbacks own the worst at minus 154. So, again, no real surprise there. It's kind of where we left off. There was only really a weekend series. So we haven't seen, and it's the same thing with we're going to go into our hot and cold players. There really wasn't much of a real sample size. I think guys at most had 13, 14, 15 at bats, so.
Yeah, so, some hot and cold teams I want to throw out there. Hot teams, you got the Rays, Yankees, White Sox, Phillies, and Tigers. I think really look out for the Phillies. I really do. I've said it before the season. I really think the Phillies are going to make a push here. I get that vibe of, what was it, the 07 Mets, 08 Mets and Phillies races, where the Mets had the lead and then they blew it late and the Phillies came on. The Phillies can easily do that again.
Yeah, that division's pretty wide open. So if they go on a run,
they got a pretty good run. They got a pretty good division. Or they got a pretty good lineup, I should say, offensively. Their bullpen's still got question marks, but they have a little bit of talent out there. The rotation with Aaron Nola, if he could just kind of settle in a little bit more, with Zach Wheeler and Nola, they can make one pitch and move for the start rotation, and maybe a pitch and move for the bullpen, and really make a push at it. And then with the Mets dealing with some injuries and Braves dealing with injury, but especially with the Mets to some big players for a lot of the year, that could easily turn into a 5-game losing streak, 5-game win streak the other way, and there you go. It's topsy-turvy.
Yep. Yeah, that division's...
And they hate each other.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like, they're a division team. No, these two teams really hate each other, so that always is a grind that way as well.
Yep.
So I think to look out for them. And some cold teams are the Royals, Red Sox, Rangers, Nats, and Diamondbacks. Obviously some teams that are struggling here, but none of those teams, cold streaks really are going to switch their thinking, I think, at the deadline here. I think those teams already have their ideas made up kind of for them.
Yeah, and like we said, there wasn't too many. It wasn't like there was a week's worth of games like normal that we had. It was really kind of, there wasn't, either you won or lost a series, or you swept a series or got swept, which could obviously...
This is mostly coming off of their last 10 games played, these teams.
Oh, okay.
That's where I got, so that's where you come from with these, most
Gotcha.
of these stats.
All right, cool. Yeah, so, like you said, maybe not some teams that are changing they're all of a sudden changing their minds, but there are teams out there that are on that border to see what happens this week, and might have some new sellers and buyers. So to move on to our next segment of the show, we have the Who's Hot and Who's Not. We'll go on to our hot and cold players of the week. Again, this is because it just goes back 7 days. This is really your hot and cold players over the weekend series. So not much huge sample size. I made this list before I knew the players of the week, so I'm missing one of the players of the week, as I usually like to mention. Mitch Haniger won player of the week. I don't have his stats in front of me, but he did win the AL player of the week. I do have the NL player of the week here, though. I already had him in here. So the 5 guys in my hot list, number 1, I have Starling Marte. Had a 500 average over the last week with an 875 slugging and a 1375 OPS. Number 2, the NL player of the week, Willy Adames. Batted .615 over the last week with a 1254 slugging and an 1841 OPS. Number 3, I have Tim Anderson. Batted .462 over the last week with an 1154 slugging and a 1615 OPS. Number 4, Miguel Rojas. Batted .438 over the last week with a 625 slugging and a 1062 OPS. And number 5, Luis Urias. Batting .429 over the last week with a 786 slugging and a 1286 OPS.
Yeah, I got a few of those names here, including Tim Anderson, but some other names I want to throw out there. David Fletcher, obviously his hit streak came to an end yesterday, but he's still playing great. Mookie Betts, been hot here, even though he was day-to-day for a little while here, but he's been doing pretty good. Tommy Pham, I believe he's been going nuts recently. Paul DeJong hitting better. Hunter Dozier and Juan Soto, those are some other names just over their last 7 games or so. Been playing pretty well. Some pitchers to look for. Corbin Burns, pitched great the other day. Carlos Rodon's been going crazy all year. Matt Harvey, I believe, had 6 shutout innings yesterday.
Oh, wow.
He's been pitching pretty good. Max Fried and Alex Reyes, who no one's really talking about, but I believe he broke the record for most consecutive saves to start his career.
Yep.
With, what is it, 22 now?
It might have been, I think it was 24, yeah.
Yeah, he's been doing pitching really well. The only thing people are a little worried about with him, his whip's about 1.3, 1.4, which is a little high, but his ERA is only like 1.7. But, people always little averages. If the whip's that high, eventually his ERA will go up a little bit. But he's got some nasty stuff. And they do expect him to still be a starter.
Oh, wow.
But with the need in the bullpen and as good as he's been doing, they're just like, yep, that's fine.
Yeah, just leave him there. Yeah.
So, so those are some hot and cold, or hot, I should say, hot pitchers and hitters.
Cool. Yeah, I saw that stat earlier today that Alex Reyes broke that record. It is nice to have that guy that kind of surprised you out of the bullpen. And you got Giovanni Gallegos, who's a great guy, to have out in your bullpen. Now you have two of them. Yeah. You're looking
Andrew
pretty
Miller
good.
Still plays well out there and guys like that.
Yeah.
But, he broke the record set by, or it was held by LaTroy Hawkins.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, of course.
Who might still be pitching somewhere.
Yeah, he's pitching somewhere, in some independent league or something.
Pitching against John Franco. Well, Julio Franco, I should say.
Yeah.
50-year-old versus 70-year-old, and Bartolo Colon's on the bump.
Yeah.
Bullpen.
Oh, my God. I can't even imagine. But to move on to our cold players of the week, the who's not. So, number 1 on my cold list, I have Giancarlo Stanton. 0 for his last 11, no walks or anything, just a 0 slash line. Number 2, Nolan Arenado. An 0.77 average over the last week with an 0.77 slugging and a 154 OPS. Number 3, Dylan Carlson. Same thing, 0.77 average over the last week with a 154 slugging and a 231 OPS. Number 4, Jesse Winker, 0.77 average with an 0.77 slugging and a 220 OPS. And number 5, Cody Bellinger, an 0.83 average with an 0.83 slugging and a 298 OPS over the last week. So all of those guys under 100 over the weekend series, and some guys extended.
Yeah, they've definitely been struggling. Some names I want to throw in there. Yordan Alvarez struggling a little bit, and Rosarena, and Carlos Correa. A few guys to add to that list. And some pitchers who have been struggling recently, at least over their last outing or two. Kikuchi for the Mariners, Jake Odorizzi, Patrick Corbin, who's been struggling all year, Blake Snell, who's been struggling relatively all year, and Sonny Gray got beat up a little bit over his last start, coming off the IL. So those are some names I just want to throw out there. To get to the next part here, we're going to go and, always go into the injuries. Obviously, with the All-Star break, the injuries are on the better side. Not so many injuries, more about coming back.
That's good.
But the injuries we do have, Luke Voigt, placed in the IL. Tim Castro, towards ACL. He's placed in the IL.
Yeah.
Jazz Chisholm, young player for the Marlins, on the IL. DeGrom and Lindor, both placed in the IL for the Mets. Both possibly looking at some lengthy absence, with DeGrom with forearm tightness over about a week and a half span, and Lindor but on oblique. Both looking at an issue there. Strasburg was on the verge of coming back. Still dealing with neck issue though, so he's kind of pushed off again. So I want to mention that. Devin Williams placed in the IL. Gavin Lux, we've seen today, placed in the IL with a hamstring injury. And we have a lot of COVID names out there. Yankees dealing with, we had 6 players on the COVID list. Rockies had a few. Braves have 1 or 2. There's a few other teams that have, guy here or there with COVID. So, I didn't want to bring up all their names because there's a chance that half of them are back tomorrow.
Yeah.
We even, but I just want to mention there are other guys with COVID as well. But on the good side of the news, John Means, pitching, throwing, he's expects to come back soon. Chris Archer will be starting a rehab assignment soon. Chris Sale is on a rehab assignment. He pitched great. He hit 97 miles per hour. He was expected to pitch 2 innings. He actually pitched 3. It's good he was pitching. So they were like, all right, let's just let him pitch another inning.
Oh, okay.
So he's been pitching really good, similar to games. And now his rehab assignment. Shane Bieber expected back soon. Rich Garver starting a rehab assignment. Eloy Jimenez on a rehab assignment. Will be rejoining the team probably within the next 2 weeks, I would say.
Wow.
Maybe 3 at the most.
Good for him.
Luis Robert, they expect him. He's starting to do some light activities and stuff like that. They expect him to be back maybe in the next month or so.
It's pretty impressive, those 2 guys.
Yeah, that would help the White Sox, a lot because they've dealt with their share of injuries too.
Yeah, sure.
Miles Mikolas for the Cardinals, expected to start his rehab assignment in the next few days. Sonny Gray's back, and Zach Allen returned from the IL for, I think, the 3rd time this year. But a young, talented pitcher for the Diamondbacks. So relatively on the good side of things for the last 2 weeks for the injury list. So that's always good.
Yeah, we've had some devastating injuries this year. Acuna, being out now. If DeGrom has what we think he has with a forearm strain, would be a real big hit to baseball. Mike Trout being hurt. Luis Robert, even though he's maybe coming back, I mean, his injury originally was big. Nick Madrigal in the same team.
Boy, Jimenez is a big player.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of big.
You could keep going.
Yeah.
You said you did Trout, Rendon 3 times. I mean, there are some Strasburg. Chris Sale hasn't been back. It's been taking longer than expected.
Yeah, Syndergaard for the Mets, same thing. Lindor's now hurt. I mean, there's some big stars that get hurt. I mean, they're not a whole heck of a lot of real season-ending injuries, not something like an Acuna or something like that, but there are guys that are not coming back as quick as we expected.
Missing
and
a chunk of time.
Yeah.
It's just how it is. So, especially with the shortened year last year, maybe also playing effect on some guys.
Yeah, that's true. Very true.
But to get to our last part of the episode, we wanted to go to our trivia question. And this one is one that I don't think many people know. I'm just going to say right now, I don't think many people know.
Yeah.
But something you would think a lot of people should be talked about more. And the trivia question is, who hit the first home run in Major League Baseball history? So in actual MLB history, who hit the first home run?
If you know this, God bless you.
So
Jesus.
On May 2nd, 1876, Ross Barnes hit the first home run. I think it's Roscoe Charles Barnes is his full name.
Yep.
Of the Chicago White Stockings, now known as the Cubs, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Versus Cincinnati's pitcher Cherokee Fisher. He hit the first home run, and it was over the fence back in the day.
Which is impressive.
You think inside the park, but no, that was back. It was over the fence.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't the first home run ever hit in baseball, obviously, but with the National League becoming an association and actually becoming Major League or professional baseball players, it became the league. This is Major League Baseball. So from then, that year, it was Major League Baseball. He hit the first official Major League Baseball home run. And I actually have a quote here from the Chicago Tribune at the time. It said, Barnes, coming to bat with 2 men out, made the finest hit of the game, straight down the left field to the carriages for a clean home run. That was the quote.
Straight down the left field.
Straight down the left field. He made the finest hit of the game.
Over the carriages, too.
Over the carriages. Because no one hits the ball. No one's hitting the ball. What? He hits the ball over the carriages, over the fence, and there he goes. Ruckus.
Yeah.
And just some info on this guy. No, he's not in the Hall of Fame. Yes, he was a great hitter. 429 one year. 138 hits in a 60-game span. Illness cut his career short. They said he was one of the greatest ball players of all time. Would have been, one of those old school guys who, I don't know, generational guys or, for the new sport, I guess you can say.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to be one of those Cap Anson guys and Nap Lajoie where it's like, oh, these are like the, cornerstones of our game.
Yeah.
But illness and some other things stopped his career short. But also he was, they called him a strong arm infielder.
Mm-hmm.
And back then they said that he didn't make many fans with many friends as first basemen because first basemen and position players were not allowed to wear gloves. So he'd just get the ball and whip it over there to first base and catching it barehanded because that was just baseball back then. So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah, so just wanted to throw that out there and give you some background on him. But who hit the first home run in Major League Baseball history? May 2nd, 1876, Ross Barnes.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, if you know that, I mean...
You would think it'd be talked about more. At least heard it a little bit.
You would think, yeah. That'd be great if the guy who hit the first home run. And not only the first home run, but the first home run was over the fence. Because a lot of times back then, if you had a home run, you had it inside the parker because parks were just nuts big and, guys are really fast. It was kind of a thing to have triples and steal bases. And
the rules, the balls didn't go as far. Everything played in your fact to just hit the ball. So, yeah, especially this in the day and age with the home run, you think it would get brought up more now because people are hitting home runs. So they're like, who the hell hit the first one?
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think that was a great trivia question to bring up because that's always nuts. Going into that old stuff and seeing the stats and the history, it's just nuts.
Feels like there's always something to learn with that old style of ball. Pre-Civil War and post-Civil War. There's always just so much. The game was so much different. You hear some things and you're just like, what?
Yeah,
like the rules were so wacky.
No umpires and managers wearing suits.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just...
Game was so different back then.
Yeah, he changed teams because he just moved.
Yeah, yeah.
He actually moved.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to go move, and I'm going to join a different team.
Yeah, I'm going to join the team once I get to my local spot. You know? It's not like he got traded or got offered money.
No, he just moved.
Yeah, he just moved. I have a new house now.
Yeah, it was just like... it was actually like a kid game.
Yep.
That adults just started playing.
Yeah, umpires weren't paid. They themselves weren't paid at all or even much.
Until, really to the professional baseball here. Cincinnati obviously was first team to get professional players, but it was just crazy, and you can just learn about it all day. I know people probably think our podcast is just old school baseball because we do talk about it a lot, but it's just because it's nuts.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's endless stuff to learn about with it. Even if you go to the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, there's just so much. You could just sit in that early section for a long time and just read all the rules they had. And this guy you've never heard of who batted, 450.
Yeah.
It's there's always something there. It feels like there's always something new to dig up. So, yeah, it's cool. I again, if you knew that answer, wow. Either you looked up that question and you just knew it because you wanted to know it, or you are just that good at you just know your baseball knowledge, man. So good for you. Well, with that, that's a good trivia question. It's a good way to kind of wrap it up here. So that's kind of all I got for this week. Looking forward to the trade deadline, and hopefully some team starts turning around. Maybe we start to see some teams run away with it. We got a lot of baseball left, so we got a whole half left. So let's not start getting too ahead of ourselves and talking about the end of the season. Let's kind of keep it to where we are. We're right at the trade deadline, and really starts the real push. Starts now. So
yeah, it's exciting time. So we'll see, but that's pretty much all I got.
Yeah. All right, then let's wrap this thing up. Thank you guys for listening. You can catch this podcast on Google Podcasts as well as Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can listen on our regularly updated YouTube channel as well as our website, screwball.podbean.com. You can follow me on Twitter at RealMikeLepre. You can follow me on Instagram at Mike Lepre.
And you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at FDubs10.
You can follow our official Screwball Twitter at ScrewballPod. You can follow our official Screwball Facebook at ScrewballPod. No E in Screw. And that's it from us, guys. We'll see you next week.
Yep. Take care.